A climate phenomenon challenging scientists.
From Texas over to Florida has done well. We're in the donut hole of the expected El Nino impacts right now.
Promised precipitation not the case with this winter's El Nino.
We were hoping that El Nino would materialize and we would get some good precipitation to kind of freshen things up.
Below average rainfall throughout the state. This is Arizona Week. Hello, and thanks for joining us. Many of us were looking forward to a wet winter, the result of El Nino, a climate phenomenon expected to bring record rainfall to the area. But here we are approaching spring, and it's been a lackluster weather pattern, even puzzling scientists. Ken Drews from the National Weather Service and Mike Crimmins, a climatologist here at the University of Arizona. Thanks for being here. Mike, we'll start with you. We're talking about El Nino. We were kind of expecting it would be a bit more active this spring.
You weren't the only one.
Okay, where is this climate phenomenon?
It's there. It's present in the Pacific Ocean. It's set some records in some metrics. So it's definitely been there. It just hasn't been here.
Sunshine, no clouds, birds are chirping out here in Tucson. Can this make sense to you?
Well, actually, the atmosphere just didn't respond the way we would think it would to the El Nino phenomenon in the ocean. We'd expect the storm track to be closer to us and passing through our area more often than it has. Certainly we haven't had the number of storms go through the area that we would have anticipated.
But to be fair, Mike, there are other states that are experiencing a lot of rainfall.
Yes, yeah. When we talk about the expectation for above average rainfall, we usually think of the whole southern third of the country, from Southern California all the way over to Florida. Southern California inland has missed out on the action as we have. Coastal California has actually picked up a little bit of speed and has caught up a little bit. And then from Texas over to Florida has done well. We're in the donut hole of the expected El Nino impacts right now.
Does that sound strange to you? I mean, how did that happen?
Your guess at this point is as good as mine, and I think that this is going to be a really active research area. If we look back at the winter, we had one quintessentially perfect El Nino week in the beginning of January, where it was exactly what we would have expected to happen at least a couple more times at some point in the wintertime. And so I think after that January run, I think we all remember it, we picked up quite a bit of precip here in Tucson. I expected that to happen 2, 3, at best maybe 4 more times, and we just didn't do it. We didn't pick it up.
Ken, how many instances of good rainfall did we actually get that we were expecting?
Well, as Mike said, really the one really good instance there in early January. We had a couple other smaller scale episodes that occurred, one in December and one in right at the turning point between January and February. Remember, at the end of January into February 1st, which was also accompanied by some very strong winds. So we picked up some rain during those time periods, but certainly not enough to bring us above normal. In fact, we're still actually below normal in some locations. Some places are kind of near normal, but most are below normal.
Is it too early to tell, Ken, what that means for the future?
As far as the El Nino part of it, that will be decreasing as predicted, which doesn't really mean a lot going into spring or to summer anyway, because the relationships are not as good as they are usually with the wintertime precip. So spring is normally dry for us. If we get any rain, it'll certainly be a bonus, but there's really not a great correlation between the El Nino pattern and the springtime precipitation that we receive here.
So, Mike, does this mean that we are finished with our rainfall for the winter at this point then?
I've gone from being a hopeless optimist at the band to pretty much a pessimist. And again, I think as Ken said, I think we'll be lucky if we can squeak out near average precip in April. And quite honestly, it's a pretty low bar when we talk about average precip for April in Tucson.
Right, for Tucson, it's only 0.3 of an inch is the normal for April.
So in this donut hole that you were referring to, this means that the other states will continue to get the rainfall, Mike?
I think that, Ken said, we're going to start to see diminishing impact of El Nino as we go into the spring. And this is a very strong El Nino event, and its imprint in the sea surface temperatures in the Pacific will continue to linger even longer than they did in 1998. But we didn't see any similar impacts as we did in 1998. But its impact on the atmosphere could continue to favor California, can continue to favor the Southeast. I expect, as Ken and I were talking, is that we will get at least 1 or 2 more rain days, which again is pretty low expectations, but something else I think will sneak in here before the end of April.
A few more rain days before April. we tend to say April showers bring May flowers. That looks like a good indication then.
Well, hopefully we get, like I said, get a couple more rain days between now and the end of April. Like I said, the bar is pretty low. 3/10 of an inch for Tucson is normal. So if you get one event that has a half inch of rain, we certainly would be fortunate, I think.
And none of this is an indication for like next year's El Nino, is it? Or could it be?
Well, I think that the models, again, which I've lost a lot of faith in, quite honestly, going forward, are suggesting that we're going to now transition to a La Nina pattern next year. That mechanistically and physically would make sense that you would have a La Nina pattern emerge after such a strong El Nino event. That's typically what has happened in the past. Quite honestly, though, if we go back and we're going to analyze the data historically, it'll be hard to tell this spring from a La Nina spring when we go back and look at the records.
Can you remind us what La Nina is and how it's different from
Sure. So La Nina is going to be that emergence of cold water in the East Pacific rather than that warm water. That convection that should have, it really has impacted the jet stream, just hasn't impacted it in quite the way that we would have expected to with the storm track, as Ken suggested. What we have in a La Nina winter is that it has a very robust impact on the jet stream and the storm track and really pushes it north. So it looks very similar to the kind of pattern we're actually in right now. So that unfortunately, is a pretty solid forecast for below average precip next winter if that La Nina emerges is of the strength that we expect it to be, and everything else holds true.
Does that have negative implications for the drought or fire season, things like that, Ken, that we tend to worry about?
Certainly that could. I think the wild card yet is still what kind of a monsoon we'll have this year. And with transitioning from the El Nino into possible La Nina during next winter, in between we'll be in we call an ENSO neutral, where it's neither colder nor warmer than normal in the Eastern Pacific, and which, again, there's not a great correlation, so we'll have to look at some other factors moving forward as we get closer to the monsoon to determine kind of what kind of monsoon we can expect, and which is always going to be kind of hit and miss anyway, but whether there'll be a few more hits than misses, I guess would be the way to put it.
Mike?
I agree. Yeah, and I think that I completely didn't expect to be thinking about enhanced fire danger at this point, but the fact that our snowpack is virtually gone across Arizona this quickly and this early, I think is an issue. And we've actually had really good monsoon rain, depending where you are, over the last couple of years, which has grown a lot of what we call fine fuels, or these sort of standing grasses. So, we're now sort of moving into that window where I think from the low desert all the way up to the trees in the forest that we're now starting to get worried about fire danger, and I don't think that was even on my radar even 2 or 3 months ago. So,
Ken, you've been studying weather for a really long time. Can you even begin to explain how this has happened?
Not a real good idea of how why this El Nino hasn't been as plentiful with precipitation for us in southern Arizona as we would expect it. I guess there's some theories about other things going on in the Pacific Ocean. That the thunderstorm activity in the Eastern Pacific has not been as great as it had been in previous strong El Nino episodes, and that could be then translating to a drier southern Arizona as well. But that's still, again, like Mike said, there's more research that will certainly come out of this.
So, Mike, I mean, El Nino has been effective for other states, just not Arizona.
yeah, yep.
Simply put, and as you said, we have the monsoon to look forward to now.
We do. I've already shifted over. That's what I'm looking forward to now.
How many days away?
91.
91. All right, gentlemen, thanks so much. Arizona's dry desert continues to be in a drought, something agencies from all over the state monitor, especially the U.S. Forest Service, which is preparing for what could be an active fire season. Heidi Schul from the U.S. Forest Service, thanks so much for being with us today. Where are we, if you would kind of describe this landscape?
We are on Highway 83 in kind of a grass, mesquite, juniper area, mixed vegetation.
Is this vegetation drier than usual, or is it pretty typical?
It's drier than usual. We can see fires this time of the year, but now we're seeing fires grow larger, faster. Our burning conditions now are what they normally would be in late April, early May.
El Nino did not turn out as many of us had hoped. What about the Forest Service? How are you managing this lackluster season?
We're preparing for fire season, as we always do this time of the year. We're bringing on our seasonal firefighters. Everybody's getting trained up and qualified. Of course, now we are in fire season year-round, so we always have permanent firefighters that are always patrolling, always ready to respond to incidents. But now at this time of the year is when we're bringing on extra forces for the summer season.
Fair to say the Forest Service was somewhat disappointed with the expected rainfall we were all hoping for?
We were hoping for more rain. I mean, we're in an extended drought, and that's taken a toll on the landscape. And so we were hoping that El Nino would materialize and we would get some good precipitation to kind of freshen things up.
How would you describe the area where we're standing at right now? How would you describe this landscape? Is it healthy? Is it in potential danger?
There is a lot of vegetation that could be cleared out. If we saw an ignition here right now, what we would see is the grasses would burn really quickly, which grasses really respond well to fast-moving fire that doesn't stay on the ground a long time. A lot of this shrubland would be cleared off, and the area would be reverted more to grassland, which is what it was before these shrubs started invading. So that's what the result would be. And then once the rain started falling, the grasses would really green up. And this actually happened last year, right almost across the street from us. We had a grass fire and it moved quickly. And once the rain started falling, fire is really a natural recycler. It returns nutrients such as nitrogen back into the soil. And the area that had burned just greened right up.
In some areas, we still see snow on the mountaintops. How will that play a role in the next few months as it gets warmer?
Well, as it gets warmer, the snow's going to melt and the conditions will dry out. Under extreme conditions, fire can burn even under snow. We saw that in the Huachucas in the 1990s with the oversight fire. So it can be a false sense of comfort, false sense of security when you look up there and see some snow, but really the snow is really evident in patches. The areas that are exposed to the sun now are already starting to dry out. And as we get hotter and drier, those are going to dry out more quickly.
What's the most important thing right now that the Forest Service is really looking at during this time of year? I mean, it's March, but as you said, it's drier than usual.
What we're always looking at first and foremost is firefighter safety. And so we're looking at what's our approach going to be to responding to wildfire. You know, an aggressive approach isn't always the best approach. Firefighting can be a hazardous occupation, so our firefighter safety, that's going to be what's always at the front of our minds as people are getting trained up right now, and a lot of that has to do with safety. And so how we respond to the fires is something we're considering also. Are we going to put every fire out? Is suppression always the best option? If a fire is human caused, then we will manage for, if a fire is human caused, we're always going to suppress it and put it out. But if we get lightning starts, then we might manage that fire for multiple objectives, which means if it's burning close to anybody's home or a ranch or a town, we might be taking suppression action on that part of the fire. But if it's burning out on the landscape where it's doing what it's been doing for centuries and should be doing, we're going to manage it and maybe steer it to where it'll have some benefits, keep it going to do its job unless something becomes threatened that suppression action needs to be taken.
There have already been 2 fires this year.
We've had 9 fires this year. 2 of them have been over 1,000 acres. One got up to 6,500 acres.
Are those human caused?
All fires were human caused except for 1 lightning start. So we're actually up for a total of 9 fires of over 8,000 acres this calendar year.
The agency is conducting some prescribed burns this time of year, but as you said, it's not new. It's something you've been planning for.
Right, we're burning over in the Galleros. This is part of an ongoing project that's been going on throughout the month and will probably burn through May. And it's been planned for, and conditions over there things are working really well. They're getting some good acreage out of it. They're not really experiencing any problems.
Sometimes fire can be a good thing for this landscape.
Fire can be a really good thing for this landscape. This landscape evolved with fire, and the absence of fire is causing some problems.
The National Weather Service monitors our climate daily. As a matter of fact, twice a day, scientists send a computerized weather balloon into the sky. Arizona Public Media's Steve Riggs has an inside look.
I came in around 1 o'clock today. We release weather balloons twice a day from this office. There's about 90 offices within the United States that do this, and then there are many, many more offices worldwide that also release these balloons. They go up twice a day, and I just happened to be the lucky pick for today to do it. So I start around 3:30. I'll get a radio sonde, a parachute, and the balloon.
Clear. Lows 48 to 53.
We shoot for a release time of about 4 o'clock. The parameters we're measuring are temperature, relative humidity, wind speed and direction, and pressure. And all of this data is fed into our computer models.
Breezy, mostly clear.
We want to continually update that data so that the forecast gets more accurate and better.
77 to 82.
If something changes in the atmosphere, we're going to know about it. And that's the reason why our short-term forecasts are much more accurate than the long-term, because small changes now can have bigger implications down the line when you get down to 5 or 7 days. As long as we're releasing these balloons twice a day, you can be more confident in the forecast that is being put out for your area. And then we have to give the radio sonde a frequency so that we can track it through its flight. It will travel to about 100,000 feet. The whole flight takes anywhere from 90 to maybe 120 minutes, depending on the day. So I take a walk outside, look and see if there's any clouds, and if there are, there's a special code that we can put into the computer to tell the computer where the clouds are, what kind they are, and how thick the cloud cover is. And then we'll make sure that the radio sonde is getting data, that the data is transmitting to our antenna receiver. We can see that on the computer. And then I'll go upstairs at that point. Many other offices are on the ground level, and they actually have a building that is made for just, filling a balloon and getting things ready. When it's 105 or 110, yep, I'm up there too for, 10 or so minutes, trying not to, burn my skin off. Oh, I love this. This has been a dream of mine, childhood dream, 10 years old, wanted to be a meteorologist, and you come in the middle of July and thunderstorms are, popping left and right, and you've got warnings to issue and radar to watch. I mean, for me, it's an adrenaline rush, and I really enjoy it. The balloon is just a big latex balloon, and we fill it with helium. It gets to around 5 or so feet in diameter when we fill it here. And we want the balloon to ascend at a certain rate, around 5 meters per second, to get a good sampling of what's actually going on in the atmosphere. Wait for 4 o'clock, and at 4 o'clock, attach the radio sonde to the end of the string, take the balloon out of the tub, and let her go. And it just goes. It flies for the next, hour and a half to 2 hours. As long as we keep getting this data in, it's going to make sure that the models give us the information to provide the public with the best forecast that we can. We're basically predicting the future. I mean, it's hard to think of it that way, but that's kind of what we're doing. And the more data we get as it gets updated and it's refreshed, we're going to be more accurate. And we come back downstairs and watch the data as it's coming in. Ultimately, it could make the decision or help you make a decision whether or not you want to take an umbrella with you, or maybe you need that extra sweatshirt, or maybe you want to wear a tank top versus a short sleeve shirt, pants over shorts. We're here to protect lives and property. That's our ultimate mission at the Weather Service, is protecting lives and property. That's why we're here every day.
Different weather news now. A new report shows warmer temperatures are impacting the Colorado River flow. Well, Connie Woodhouse, a professor here at the U of A School of Geography and Development, thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
Tell me about this research that you just completed involving the temperatures of the Colorado River.
Well, the research basically was looking at the effects of temperature on Colorado River flow, the upper Colorado River basin, so the main area where the water is generated. We were trying to figure out if temperatures were having a greater effect on stream flow in recent years. This is a question that was of interest to water managers, and we were looking at the role that temperature was playing.
What did the temperatures tell you about this?
Well, what we learned was that in basically over the long period of record, we looked at 1906 to 2012, and we also looked at the years since 1960, so the last 50 years. Precipitation in the winter is really the big control, and that's not news. We knew that. But in some years, temperature plays a bigger role. So in years where we have less stream flow in the Colorado River Basin based on what we might expect from precipitation, temperatures seem to be more important. And in years where we have more runoff than we might expect given the precipitation in the winter, temperatures also seem to be important. But the first case where we're getting less runoff than we might expect is happening more frequently since the 1980s.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, we do see a trend in the Colorado River Basin, as is seen in most areas, of warming temperatures. And the temperatures we were looking at were March through July, so spring into summer, and that's particularly a season where we're seeing warming temperatures, the trend in temperatures.
Is this global warming, or some people might think, is this an effect of global warming?
Well, it's certainly a manifestation of it.
How would you describe that? I mean, what does that mean for the near future then?
Well, as we're seeing the role of temperature becoming more and more important on sort of moderating what the precipitation is delivering to the river, as temperatures warm, that role will probably become more and more important.
How did you go about collecting some of this data? I mean, do you travel along the river at different times of the year?
The data that we used were data that were available already. We had stream flow data from Bureau of Reclamation, so these were estimated natural flows for the Colorado River, so the effects of depletions and diversions and reservoir evaporation have been removed. That was the stream flow data that we worked with, and then we worked with temperature and precipitation data that come from instrumental records from thermometers and rain gauges in the upper basin.
So the research was not intended to explore the drought, but you found there were some factors that indicated things about the future drought we're seeing, or the current drought we're seeing.
Right, and I think what we saw was that in the current drought and the previous drought were characterized more by warmer temperatures and not as dry conditions. So as we see the warmer temperatures in the future, this suggests that we might see more of this sort of flavor of drought as we go into the future.
You mentioned earlier that water managers need this information or wanted the information. What would you say it's being used for?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think water managers are well aware that temperature does play a role. I think they wanted to know more about that, and I think this information will be useful for them, I think, just in knowing that this is what's going on, not that they'll actually apply it to anything in particular, just sort of like, oh, sort of a heads up, we're seeing this increasing importance of temperature, and just keeping that in mind as the years go on.
As a scientist, what was most striking about what you found?
I actually was surprised that the role of temperature in these years, again, where we're seeing either less runoff or more runoffs than we might expect from the precipitation, that the role of temperature is really, really quite important.
You indicated that people sort of need to know this information. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, I think, in the West here, we live in an arid or semi-arid environment where water is scarce, and I just think people need to be aware, if they're not already, which hopefully they are, that we have to really take care of our water resources. We have to be cognizant of the fact that our demands on water are probably outstripping the supplies, even without climate change. But with climate change, that's going to make things, going to enhance that effect even more.
The Buzz now with my colleague here at Arizona Public Media, Sarah Hammond, our science producer, here to talk about El Nino. Sarah, thanks for sitting down with us.
Happy to be here.
Let's start with one El Nino fact. It really hasn't been a bust this year.
It hasn't. El Nino is a phenomenon, so it's the warming of the ocean, the mid-Pacific, and that warming causes precipitation to rise, and then the atmosphere grabs it and takes it east. This year, the jet stream went north, so the Pacific Northwest got the benefit of the rain.
As some of the interviews earlier in the show said, it really formed a donut hole, and unfortunately for Arizona, we were in the donut hole, but everywhere else got the rain.
That's right. Southern California and the desert Southwest has not benefited as everyone had hoped, but the behavior of one El Nino, say 97, 98 or 82, 83, doesn't necessarily mean that behavior will repeat itself the next time. It's just nature.
Overall, though, forecasters, climate experts say this was a pretty good El Nino nationwide, one of the top.
What the NOAA experts are saying is it's clearly going to be in the top 5. They won't know until it's over. It won't be number 1 or number 2 as those other 2 years I mentioned, but it could very well be in the top 5, and that dates back to 1895.
Let's talk about a little bit of the science of El Nino, if you will. You mentioned it's a Pacific Ocean phenomena. Right. How do the atmosphere and the ocean play together, or do they not really?
Well, the ocean warms up, and most recently it was about 2 degrees Celsius above the normal temperatures. That causes the moisture to rise, and then the jet stream is moving across the globe, and it picks it up and just takes it. So they do and they don't work together. I mean, the jet stream's going to do what it's going to do, and it's just going to the moisture's going to go along for the ride.
We've heard a lot about global warming in this show and all over the place. Is global warming contributing to El Nino, or how does it affect El Nino, if at all?
The scientists aren't really ready to say it has an effect. If there is climate change, will there be more frequent El Ninos? They're not ready to say that, but let's face it, we do know the ocean is warming, so eventually it may be a cause and effect situation.
We have about 30 seconds left for this, but with the end of El Nino, does that mean La Nina is next, or what happens?
Yes, typically, and a La Nina typically follows an El Nino. The climate folks are looking at that. What a La Nina is increased probability for cooler and drier conditions. So we'll see if that comes to fruition.
All right, Sarah, thanks so much for sitting down. Hopefully clearing up any questions that were left on the science of El Nino. And now turning to politics. Governor Doug Ducey signed legislation this week cutting state shared revenue from municipalities and counties that pass laws that conflict with state law. One example of that is a plastic bag law, or a ban of plastic bags. The League of Arizona Cities and Towns sent a letter to the governor asking him to veto the measure. The group argued that the law diminished the role of local officials. Officials in the governor's office say the bill ensures everyone in the state is playing by the same rules. And turning to presidential politics, Tuesday is Arizona's presidential preference primary. The major candidates from both parties are spending time in Arizona in these days before voters cast their primary ballots next week. We'll have a full wrap-up of the primary results and what they mean for the state going forward. And that's our show. For Lorraine Rivera and the entire Arizona Week crew, thanks for watching.